Many people will assume that things like Weller or Blanton's or even Pappy are the reason that bourbon prices have skyrocketed over the last 20 years. However, that doesn't really explain why MGP-sourced whiskeys are now sporting 3-digit price tags. I wanted to kind of dive into this, and I ended up discovering quite a bit more than I thought. First, let's talk about materials. When you want to make whiskey, you need a few things. You need grain, water, barrels, and time. Now, all those things are fine until your suppliers start kind of gouging you on the prices and driving up the price of making your whiskey. Now, if we look at macro trends, the price of corn has at least doubled in the last 20 years, actually a little bit more than that depending on when you're looking. This is because of a few things. We had the Great Recession in 2008, there was a huge drought that affected Russia and Ukraine, as well as some areas of the United States back in 2010. And of course, in 2020, we had COVID, where everything shut down. Now, because whiskey's a long-term product, if you're making something in 2020, you're paying 2020 prices that you're not going to be able to recoup for another 4, 5, 8, 10 years. For example, let's use Heaven Hill's mash bill that they use in Evan Williams, Elijah Craig, and Henry McKenna. It's 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% malted barley. With current grain prices, it costs about 23 cents in grain to make a bottle of whiskey, assuming about 250 bottles per barrel. Even if grain prices were halved, we're talking about 11, 12, 13 cents per bottle, and that's only about $25 over the course of the whole barrel. It's really not enough to make up the significant change in price. So it's probably not the grains causing the problem. So let's talk about demand. In the early 2000s, whiskey distilleries were sitting on a surplus of whiskey. There was just tons of this stuff hanging around. But then demand began to grow, and supplies began to dwindle. Now, obviously, you can't make things like 12, 10, 8, or even 4-year-old bourbons overnight. So what do you have to do? Well, you charge more for it, right? As your stocks dwindle, you charge more. Except that's not exactly what happened. A lot of the flagship whiskeys, things like your Jim Beam White or your Jack Daniel's 7 or your Evan Williams, these actually didn't even keep up with inflation. They kept the prices of these very low. In the case of Jack Daniel's, I believe it was only a 23% increase between 2000 and today, whereas inflation was about 67%. So obviously they want you to get into whiskey, and then they're going to start charging you for the harder to reach stuff. Now, let's take a real example. This comparison might make you a little bit angry, so trigger warning, huge prices incoming, I guess. Elijah Craig, this dwindling bottle that I keep around just for such videos like this, in 2000, this was about $22.50. Today, it's about $33.50, somewhere in there. It's gone up about 47%. Inflation, again, 67%. So we're in good shape. Now, something that we would actually chase as people who enjoy whiskey might be an Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. You don't need to chase this one per se, but you do need to look, right? So an ECBP back in 2013 when it first came out was $35. Say it with me now. How expensive is this now? I don't think I've seen it below $75 in a very long time. And that's a raise of about 115%. If it would have kept up with inflation, the way that, not that this one did, if it just rose at the 67%, this would be $45. I told you it might make you angry. So demand seems to be a huge factor, but that's just Econ 101 stuff. Supply and demand drive cost, right? So let's talk about sales and marketing. Buffalo Trace is one of the biggest offenders when it comes to artificially inflating the cost of your whiskey. Now, this is kind of the behind the scenes at your local liquor store. So what's happening is a company like Buffalo Trace, or more specifically their distributor, will say, hey, if you buy 20 cases of our Wheatley vodka, which is $17 a bottle, we'll give you the honor of buying a case of Blanton's. And then you can sell that for whatever you want. Now, this, you kind of have to. As a small business, you have to just deal with this stuff. But here's the problem. You now have 20 cases of vodka, which will probably sell, but not for a while. Now, you've also got these 6 bottles of Blanton's, and these things are like gold to you as a small business. So instead of charging the MSRP of whatever it is, call it $50, $60, you're going to charge $150. Because for every 20 people who walk out of the store disgusted at you, there's going to be that one guy that walks in and buys it for $150 because they want to have it on their shelf. And you have all this, vodka that you can kind of sell over time. And this kind of thing doesn't just happen with Buffalo Trace. It happens with multiple different distilleries. And it's how you get these allocated bottles of whiskey. And it's one of those things that when I talk to the store owners candidly, they all complain about this. Then you have sourced MGP whiskeys, which are kind of these overnight companies that make a whiskey for a purpose. They buy from MGP, they make a cool story about it, and they charge you about $100 to $115 for their bourbon that's 4 years aged, and it looks like the decanter looks like a baseball, or this one came with a Derringer. Like, they're all stupid, but some of them I've bought because frankly it looked like it'd be fun to do on a channel, but I know better and I'm buying them to be funny. Other people don't know better. They see a cool looking bottle that they think might taste good, and then they get it home after spending $100 on it, and it tastes like garbage. Maybe it's over oaked and really tannic, or it's a drain pour at worst. Now, I'm sure that you're yelling at your screen, Bill, talk about the secondary market. Why isn't he mentioning the secondary market? It's clearly a problem, and you're not wrong. Here's the thing. Resellers are in every single hobby, and they're all scumbags. I will just go blanket statement. Every reseller out there is a scumbag. I don't care what your reasoning for it is. Do something better with your time. But here's the thing. Resellers are going to happen. They're driving up the prices of everything, and they are a problem. You personally, if you support resellers, you are making it so that people can't try good whiskeys. And that's a shitty thing. Lastly, and a fairly obvious point, is that whiskey can be a status symbol. If you get something like a Pappy Van Winkle or an Old Forester birthday bourbon or just something exclusive and rare, it's fun to show that off. And it's not one of the better parts of humanity, but it is one of the more consistent parts, unfortunately. And I'm honestly no better. However, I have a whiskey channel where if I get something like an Octomore or whatever that I really want to share with you guys, I have a legit reason, kind of, but also a tax write-off. So, I mean, that's cool. But I also have friends who come over and I let them pick stuff off the wall, and I love to share it with them, but I don't say, hey, this is a, I don't know, $150 bottle of Ardbeg special edition. I more say something like, you guys should try this one out because it's kind of limited and you're probably not going to find it anywhere else. See how rehearsed that is? Like, I've said that a lot of times in my life. So it's something that we all do. You shouldn't be too ashamed of it, but it's not one of the finer points of humanity. But it is a very good marketing tactic. So we're back to the original question. Why is your bourbon so expensive? And I was very surprised to hear that the grain was actually kind of the least part of this whole price increase. It's mostly demand and marketing, and a little bit of status symbol. But for the most part, way more people are drinking whiskey, and so they know they can get away with it, and their marketing team is certainly not shutting it down, because who knows when the bubble's going to burst. I can't really blame them for that, but what I can do is encourage you to shop a little bit more local. If you go to your liquor store, buy from a distillery that you don't know. Just, do yourself a favor, Google it real quick, make sure they're not just an MGP sourced thing. Not that there aren't some good ones out there, but let's support the little guys. The big guys have had their heyday. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. If you'd like to help me to buy some more of these bottles, I'd love it. Go check out the Patreon. Other than that, I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Cheers.